Time to jump into the unrehearsed deep. Well, God willing, it's deep. Deep in what way? Spiritually deep. Can you make any promises as a human being? No. And jumping into the deep would be one way of looking at things, in that this is unrehearsed and God willing, he may or may not speak. Am I worthy for God to speak here as through course of event, or through word, or inspired thoughts, or even direct revelations from God? Can I lay claims to such things? And should you get a direct revelation from God, would you even obey such a command, seeing such things are often lonely quests and no one might listen to you? Or would you even speak God's words to whomsoever you are sent, for fear of persecution and that awful lonely feeling of standing alone with God? Such is the life of, let's say, the said prophet. Can anyone claim to being a prophet? If you hear from God, or if God has spoken to you in your past, then you may or may not say you are a prophet in that sense. Does this follow that you are a good prophet or a bad prophet? Not all prophets found it easy to obey God, because very often it was the case that they stood alone with God and were persecuted, and there was no audience for the same. Well, to jump into the deep with the world now, and words come to the mind of words like, this is relying upon memory, who comforteth us in all our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort them which are in any trouble by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God. So, in other words, if you read into those words, who comforteth us in all our tribulation? Well, God willing, it's God, that we may be able to comfort them which are in any trouble. So often it's the case that you are more comforting to others when you are in much the same, if not the same, tribulation. And so when you maybe see yourself in someone else, or someone else in you, going through the same thing and rowing alongside you, then you are more open to their words, and you are more equipped to speak to the same people in the same boat as you, being in the same boat. Such is not always the case with those that have all the symbols of affluence. They're speaking more from a lofty high tower. And this might create a divide, in that you are merely receiving crumbs as thrown down from the high and lofty tower. And so it's not so easy to eat. Like that woman who once said, even the dogs eat bread under the table. And yet that woman who said those words to Jesus was more justified in Jesus' sight, she liking herself to a dog that merely ate crumbs from beneath the children's table. So people are often that hungry, they're willing to eat crumbs that drop from the children's table. And the children having a feast, not always oblivious to other people's sufferings. And I guess this woman, being a kind of an outsider in that particular occasion, on that story, found herself in that situation, that she wasn't one of the children of Israel and all this sort of stuff. It was from a foreign tribe, land, whatever. She saying to Jesus that she was assuming, liking herself, well, even the dogs eat crumbs from the children's table. And so Jesus she became more justified than others for those kind of words. She had more faith than even the children, in other words. So, they say many that are first shall be last, and the last first. And who knows where we all stand in the kingdom of God. So who can say, who can boast? Who can know? Only God knows the heart. And we all have our problems. And interesting, when, let's say, on the subject of great change now. Everything in the world, whether we go along with the world, the course of this world or not, either way you look at it, we're all caught up in the rising tide and the changing tides. And the eventide, as some of those old songs, old hymns would say, eventide being the evening tide, fast forwards the evening tide. We're living in a world of rapid change, and of course we of late hear that the Elizabethan era is over, and that to many, if anything else, they read into that, symbolises again great sweeping change. Everything's in great sweeping change these days. And they say there's nothing more constant than change, but even so, we still need some form of stability in our lives. And so, with this sweeping great change going on, it leaves a person thinking of, let's say, famous sayings, there's nothing more constant than change. Yeah, though there might be nothing more constant than change, we still need anchors and we still need stability. And if one era comes to an end, then we wonder what the new era is going to bring, because as a rule, the course of event usually is that change, time and change, time and tide wait for no man. And you think, well, time and tide wait for no man, but where are the tides turning? Where is this all taking us? And we're now in a world that's very rapidly changing. And can we keep up with it? No. Do we feel stable in it ourselves? No, because everything around us points to instability and change. But where is this constant feeling of continuity that we all need? And we do then find ourselves running into the everlasting arms. Underneath are the everlasting arms, as some other songs or hymns might say. Underneath are the everlasting arms, and the everlasting arms you picture there underneath of the everlasting arms to catch us when we fall. And fall we will, when great rapid change takes place in the world. Then you either move with the times, which doesn't always follow that you do, because the times might change and they don't suit you. You might find yourselves then faced with great temptation to compromise, to go along, to get along. You might find a great shake-up going on in the world that shakes you up too, and then you're aware of so many sins in yourself that once you pointed to others as having, and therefore the word hypocrisy might come into your mind, and you're not quite the man you thought you were. It's like a rude awakening, you might say. And so it really is a rapidly changing world. And interesting, when you look at some of these old hymns, yes, they might be sang in the wrong spirit very often, but originally written is interesting what was on a person's heart when they wrote these words. And a lot of these old hymns, even some of the words, some of the verses that they wrote taken out and not so much sung. Perhaps they're too embarrassing or too kind of pointing to the faults in you, whereas we often like to point to the faults in others. But honest words are good. And interesting when you look at this old hymn here, Abide With Me. Wow, I won't go into the whole thing. I'm on Wikipedia. And in short, it's saying a prayer for God to stay with the speaker throughout life and death. It was written by Light in 1847. So the further back you often find the truth. It was written by Light in 1847 as he was dying from tuberculosis. It is most often sung to the tune Eventide, so the evening tide, by the English organist William Henry Monk. So interesting how these various people come together and form. One writes the song and another often writes the tune. But the words of the song the words of the hymn are quite telling. And interesting words, if I can find them here, again, talking about great change. And really, there's nothing more constant than change. And fast forwards the evening tide. You think, well, that must mean like the eventide being the evening tide. Time and tide wait for no man. All things change, but Jesus never is a good a reality, let's say, to have. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runneth into it and are safe. Jesus Christ, this is an actual verse, Jesus Christ the same yesterday and today and forever. So in a rapidly, there's nothing more constant than change, in a rapidly changing world, where do we throw our anchor? Where do we run? Who do we hold on to? And this man here, dying of tuberculosis, he'd seen life and death, apparently. It was written various times in his life, associated with another friend who was dying. The words would come to mind, him saying to him, abide with me. And words, abide with me, taken from the scriptures, and all this married together, coming out of awful circumstance, in that great hardship, great suffering in a person's life, who comforted us in all our tribulation, him comforting his friend, no doubt, and also suffering from great tribulation, him having illness at the same time. So who comforteth us in all our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort them which are in any trouble. So often the best time to write these various words in poetry or hymns often come out of great tribulation, great troubles yourself. And the objection here was no doubt to comfort his friend, as being who comforteth us in all our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort them which are in any trouble, by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God. So God willing, we are comforted of God. And this person here, what was his name again? Not over familiar. I'll just simply look this up because I like some of the words in the hymn, in the song. You say hymn, it sounds kind of like the usual stuff, but you say song and poetry, and it all looks different. Either way you look at it, it was a hymn or a song or a poem. And someone put music to these words, whether it was originally intended to be a hymn, I don't know. Whether it was originally intended to be a heart cry to God, at the same time comforting his friend and going through great tribulations himself. I don't know. Do we all know what's in a person's heart? With the name written by someone called Light in 1847. So interesting words, as a lot of people have no doubt heard these words and know the tune better, but abide with me, fast falls the eventide, that's the evening tide, the darkness deepens, Lord, with me abide. Which again, like I say, you can relate to the words, even if you don't like the hymn, even if you don't like the way it's sung, even if you don't like the droning voices that often drone out in churches. Either way you look at it, people often confide and refer to these words in times of troubles and great sweeping change, either in your own life or in the world around you. Well, judging by these words, if you're to judge, it appears that the troubles and heartbreak and woe is coming from the troubles in his own life, as well as a rapidly changing world around him. Perhaps, let's say, it might all look rapidly changing if you were dying of tuberculosis, let's say, because indeed everything would be changing around you, because you are the world is leaving you behind, let's say. So he's saying, abide with me, fast falls the evening tide. The darkness deepens, Lord, with me abide. The last thing we want is darkness to deepen, but even so, darkness is deepening. Even so, Lord, with me abide, he's saying. Jesus Christ, really the verse comes to mind, Jesus Christ. The same yesterday and today and forever. And also you kind of, maybe you know, maybe you didn't memorize, maybe you've heard songs from, words from other songs, 100 Christian Soldiers, no doubt. That was written centuries ago, I don't know. Never really looked it up that much. But kings and thrones may perish and kingdoms rise and fall. And the words go on, constant will the cross of Christ remains, constant cross of Christ remains. So in all of this great sweeping change and instability going on around us and even in us, even in our own lives as well as around us, it's one thing coping with great sweeping, astronomical, you might say, extreme change going on around us so rapidly now, one thing after another, kingdoms rising and falling, kings and thrones may perish, kingdoms rise and wane, but the cross of Jesus constant will remain. Well, those words kind of fit in with these words here in a funny sort of way, because he's talking about great change and how kingdoms rise and fall in onward Christian soldiers, let's say. But this one has various kind of much of the same in some ways to it, in that he's confiding in Jesus Christ. Help of the helpless, abide with me. So abide with me, fast falls the eventide, that's the evening tide, the darkness deepens. Lord, with me abide, when other helpers fail, which they will, and comforts flee. Well, again, you've got a situation where you have the energy crisis. And who's going to comfort you in all your tribulations there? Would it be those with all of these symbols of affluence and being influential from a high and lofty tower in reaching out to comfort you in all your tribulation there? No, because you don't feel that they're in the same boat. But this one here, obviously confiding in Jesus coming here and living as a human being and putting himself in the same boat as all of us, and every one of us can see something of ourselves in Jesus, and he rowing beside us in reaching out to us, and this person here reaching out also to his friend. Him also going through, who come to us in all our tribulation, having tribulations in his own life. So he's got this great tribulation, trouble going on in his own life, and rather than give in to it, he's putting his pen in his hand, his heart in his hand, and he's wrote these words. It says that he was thinking of his friend that died years ago. Now he's also suffering from dying tuberculosis, as it says himself. And so either way you look at it, people have tried to figure out when and how he wrote these words, and this is the kind of things that was going on in his life. So abide with me, fast falls the eventide, the darkness deepens, Lord, with me abide. Well, the darkness certainly deepens these days when other helpers fail and comforts flee. Well, comforts might flee now because people can't afford the general cost of living, and it's all really about it for a lot of people now. Comforts might very well flee because they can't even afford to put bread on the table or pay their energy costs. So there's that. Help of the helpless, oh, abide with me. Swift to its close, ebbs out life's little day. So I guess he's coming to the end of his life. Maybe he's thinking of his friend's life. Earth's joys grow dim. Its glories pass away. Wow, of late we see these glories passing away. And whether you find yourself as part of the Great Divide, or whether you relate to the, let's say, the royal family and the death of the king, death of the queen, and the king coming in and what have you, you do, there is that battle going on within you of this sense of the Great Divide, but at the same time there's this sense of great sweeping change, and certain people do symbolise a certain era in life, and maybe this queen or king could be better or than the one coming in, or will the one coming in be better or worse than the one going out. Either way you look at it, in the final day of judgment, the books are open and the dead are judged out of those things which are written in the books, it says, which suggests they either did good or bad in their lives, as we all do. No one can boast of not getting everything right. But either way you look at it, in our various circumstances, we choose to do the right thing or the wrong thing. And yeah, at the end of the day, God will be the judge. There will be the great white throne judgment. We all stand before God as mere human beings. Or if you're a Christian, you stand before Christ as a mere human being, full of fault and failings in your own individual, unique circumstances, which are unique to every individual. Which again is why it's not so easy for one to judge another, because you might not be in the same situation or the same boat as them. And what would you do if you were them? You can't always tell, because you are you. Every way of man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord trieth the Spirit. So God, only God knows, because every situation is unique. So it goes on, swift to its close, ebbs out like life's little day, earth's joys grow dim, its glories pass away. Well, the glories that was once England are certainly passing away, and because we had a queen that was here 70 years with a sense of continuity, which had a way of having her roots in the past when the world was a better place. And now that chapter on this world's history is closed. One door is closed and another door is opening, and we wonder where the new king might take us. Let's say, will he be better or will he be worse? Not to suggest the queen was the worst of the worst, but who knows? The problem is we have this great divide of those that have all the symbols of affluence, and when they speak and do and go and walk and whatever they do, they are surrounded by symbols of affluence, the same of which most people have not, and therefore they have great influence as a result of having great wealth and great position in life. But even so, at least the gospel was preached to 40 million people, talking largely of the resurrection of the dead, and giving us again a sense of continuity, that though we had a Christian queen, whether she was a good Christian queen or not, let's say only God can judge. She claims she was Christian, let's say, but only God is the judge. As she claims to be Christian in that, you can only imagine, was she or was she not born again? Again, if you're a born again Christian, you would wonder if she was born again, or did they operate in the works of the law or self-righteousness, or was it all God? Was it Jesus? Was it for show? Did they have their moments of truth? Only, again, God would know. But even so, whether in pretense or whether in truth, let's say, nevertheless, Christ is preached. And Christ was certainly preached to 40 or more, or 40, one of the greatest ceremonies in the world. You might say inducing all kinds of thoughts and feelings within people. If you look up the word, that's what it means to be a ceremony, is to induce within people, really. You might say things that are more serious, that are going to be heard at a deeper level when there's a ceremony taking place. In fact, when people get married, I remember reading this. In a ceremony, you, in the midst of a great audience, you say serious things to each other. And this kind of amplifying and giving occasion to the serious words that you are now saying. And so giving a ceremony and thoughts and feelings and even psychological things that come out of ceremonies, great meaning and great depth is the thing. So if anything came out of all of this in the last ceremonial days, you would say at least the gospel was preached, the resurrection, with a sense of continuity there for those that choose to be Christian or not. And not to judge the Queen, but leave that all in God's hands. And really, at the end of the day, only to hope and pray that either way you look at it, various situations are different for different people, unique to the individual, and who can say what you would do if you were them? You might even find yourself doing exactly the same thing, if not worse, to be fair. So leave that all for God to judge. So swift to its ebb, where are we now? Swift to its close, ebbs out life's little day. Earth's joys grow dim, its glories pass away. Change and decay in all around I see. Well, we all see this, the moral standards are declining nowadays. And every time you turn on the news, it fills you with horror and woe and dread. So change and decay in all around I see. O thou who changest not, abide with me. There you have the sense of Jesus. What did Jesus say when he's left this world? Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. In other words, even unto the end of this age, Jesus is with us always, not just speaking to his disciples who've come and gone and died, but speaking to all Christians. Lo, I am with you always, he says. Even unto the end of the world, Jesus will be with us. Though the world changes around us, great sweeping change, especially these days. And you might add great apocalyptic change, but even so, these words again. Now, here's some other words that come up in this song that you don't always hear in the churches, let's say, or in hymns and what have you. So he goes on to say, not a brief glance, I beg, a passing word, right? So do we want just a brief glance, I beg? So, some people have their moments of truth and they get their little peeps into what Jesus knocking at the door of your heart. Behold, Jesus says, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him and will sup with him and he with me. Well, everyone gets their chances. And everyone has a little tap, tap, tap on the door of their heart. Jesus asking to come in. Not a brief glance, I beg. Well, everyone's had that glance. A passing word. Behold, I stand at the door and knock, Jesus speaking. But as thou dwellest with thy disciples, Lord, familiar. You want Jesus to be familiar with you, to know all about you. To trust him with all your heart, all your strengths and weaknesses, all your faults and failings, every secret thing you might do, God knows about, and you can trust it more with Jesus than anybody else. Familiar, you want Jesus to be familiar with you, condescending, patient, free. Come not to sojourn, but abide with me. So not staying just for a moment or two, but to abide, to stay with you, abide with me. In a rapidly changing world, in a rapidly changing, you yourself can change. The world can change, people change. Do we change for the better? Do we change for the worse? Most people these days change for the worst. The friend you once know, he's changed so terribly that you have to get away from him rather than run to him, and so on. So come not, in other words here, come not in terror. So he's talking about the second coming here. Come not in terror as the King of Kings. Yes, there's that. But kind and good, with healing in thy wings, tears for all woes, a heart for every plea. Come, friend of sinners. Now he's like showing his heart. He doesn't feel such a great person. He's aware of the constant rush to sin that we all have. Come, friend of sinners, thus abide with me. So not being so self-righteousness, acknowledging his faults and failings here. I need thy presence every passing hour. What but thy grace can foil the tempter's power? Who like thyself, my guide and stay can be? What's it going to? So through cloud and sunshine, Lord, abide with me. So it's not always, there's clouds and there's sunshine in a person's life. What but thy grace can foil the tempter's power? We have a very dangerous enemy, the tempter's power. What but thy grace? We can't fight this in our own strength. Did we in our own strength confide, our striving would be losing. Were not the right man on our side, the man of God's own choosing. Just ask who that may be. Christ Jesus, it is he. Lord Sabaoth, his name, from age to age the same. Again, you have those feelings and words of continuity in this other hymn by Martin Luther. And though this world with devil's field should threaten to undo us, we will not fear, for God hath willed his truth to triumph through us. The prince of darkness grim, we tremble not for him. His rage we can endure, for lo, his doom is sure. One little word, that word Jesus, shall fail him, that word above all earthly powers. No thanks to them abideth. The Spirit and the gifts are ours through him who with us sideth. Let goods and kindreds go as they will, this mortal life also, the body they may kill. God's truth abideth still, his kingdom is forever. There you have again the sense of continuity. And he goes on, I fear no foe, with thee at hand to bless. Ills have no weight. So again, he's talking of the illnesses that he no doubt has. Ills have no weight, and tears no bitterness. Where is death's sting? Where grave thy victory? I triumph still if thou abide with me. Hold thou thy cross before my closing eyes. Shine through the gloom and point me to the skies. Heaven's morning breaks and earth's vain shadows flee. In life, in death, O Lord, abide with me. So praise Jesus.